I have always done a lot of work on self-development and networking, and it's so important to be meeting women of all walks of life throughout our community as we work together to better our community.
I became a member of WLC, which was special to me because I wanted to be a part of a women's group that was able to give back to the community and a part of a group that's able to network with each other, to learn from each other, and to support each other.
I got involved in WLC United Way because I saw that as a great opportunity to give back to the community in different ways through the different organizations that United Way supports.
I have always felt that the work that the Women's Leadership Council and the United Way does is so important, but I have really felt the impact over the past several months with the pandemic. I think that even younger generations have felt that sense of isolation and that sense of separation. When you are feeling isolated, a sense of community is what brings you back. The United Way and the Women's Leadership Council is a terrific community who work together, who encourage relationship building and working within our area to better us all.
So what makes WLC stand apart from other women's organizations is that it's locally focused, so it serves the communities you live in.
And you know, how much or how little, it's not really a sacrifice. It's that knowing that there are communities, there are organizations struggling in this pandemic time that really need the support of WLC.
I would encourage any young professional to get involved.
What differentiates WLC from other organizations is the fact that this is not just a professional organization or professional networking. It is to put together a group of women that are dedicated to helping their local communities and support those that are in need.
Again, it's working with like-minded women. I think as professionals, we all need that sisterhood so that we're able to bounce ideas from, to learn new skills. And again, it's just a valuable part of being able to give back to the communities in which we live, work, and serve.
In my profession, and particularly as a small business owner, networking is very important to me to help me grow my business. There are so many different groups out there, but what sets Women's Leadership Council apart is that it's not a group that has one focus or one initiative. It's so multifaceted. Out of the group, I get networking, community involvement, engagement, support from other like-minded business professionals.
Personally, my WLC membership has helped me because it is satisfactory for me that I can do something for the community that I live in. And I enjoy that I have the ability to direct services to different organizations in my backyard.
I think not only giving back to the community with financial support, but actually giving of my time and myself on that personal level is a huge benefit for me as well.
I would encourage new members to get involved, to participate, and to get to know the other members of our group.
If this is your first event with WLC, albeit a virtual one, I would advise you to use that as an opportunity to get to know other members of WLC.
And that being a part of WLC, just attend as many of the virtual events as possible. Network with other women that you know that are WLC members.
The United Way has bridged the gap from in the past when we were able to meet in person and have large gatherings. They've really worked to transition and pivot to virtual events.
I think this is limitless. Even though we are virtual, there's still the ability to give back, to network, and to use the WLC as a platform for support.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Ukno, co-chair of United Way's Women's Leadership Council, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this year's annual kickoff event. Hopefully, a lot of you got to enjoy that video if you joined us a little early. Whether this is your first or your 19th WLC kickoff event, welcome. In a way, this is a first for all of us. We are coming together virtually today, of course, and this is the first time we've come together as a region with members from Allegheny, Westmoreland, Fayette, and Butler counties. Nearly 2,100 strong and growing. Looks like we're going to set a record for the number of members joining us today. Whether you're at home or at work, we hope you're someplace safe. But first, I want to thank our sponsors. It takes a lot to put a virtual event together this size, and we couldn't do it without their support. Our premier sponsors, UPMC and UPMC Health Plan. Our keystone sponsors, PNC, Highmark, and Allegheny Health Network. Our event sponsors, FedEx and Sendell Motors. We are grateful for them for making this afternoon's event possible. It's been a little bit more than a year since last year's WLC kickoff event. So much has happened in the past year. We'll be discussing that in depth today. But let me first brag about something incredibly positive from this past year, thanks to all of you. Despite the challenges that we've had in the past year, the WLC members have contributed more than 8.9 million in last year's campaign. 8.9 million. Let's give ourselves a huge virtual round of applause. Your generosity couldn't have been better timed. In 2020, literally every neighborhood, every household has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The effects of this crisis are widespread, but the pain, especially the economic pain, is not evenly distributed. Women, especially women of color and those with children, have felt a devastating impact of this financial crisis. Nationally, the unemployment rate for women is nearly 3% higher than the overall population. That's due to demands on homeschooling, lack of safe and reliable transportation, rolling shutdowns of services, low-paying jobs. It's no surprise that those hit hardest are women who are already vulnerable and already living below the poverty line. The situation is daunting, but there is hope. Around the world, women leaders are doing their part, in large and in small ways, in their homes and communities, in local and national government, in boardrooms, in laboratories, and more. As many of you know, one of the purposes of the WLC is to recognize and celebrate the importance of women leaders. And we have so much to be grateful for right here in the region. We can see the dedication and bravery in women leaders right here at home in our local and regional levels. There are leaders, many in our audience today, and certainly on our panel, that are courageously fighting to overcome the crisis. We are persevering through this adversity because it's in our nature to do so. Today, you've been invited to join a very special topical discussion with some of those female leaders who are making an enormous impact in our community now when it needs their leadership the most. So let's get started. I am thrilled to be able to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Tracy Serto. Tracy is the founder and publisher of Next Pittsburgh, the online magazine she started and launched in 2014. Prior to starting Next, Tracy led Pop City Media for nearly 8 years. A graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, as well as Leadership Pittsburgh, Tracy is very involved in several boards and is a passionate advocate for healthy, vibrant, sustainable cities, and one in particular, Pittsburgh. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, thank you so much for that kind intro, Stacy. I am really happy to be here today to support United Way and Women's Leadership Council. So we have put together a fabulous panel of really accomplished women for today's discussion. The chat line is going to be open, so note some questions if you want to ask them later. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel to you. Our first panelist is Karen Larimar. Karen serves as Executive Vice President, Chief Executive Officer of Retail Banking, and Chief Customer Officer of the PNC Financial Service Group. In her role at PNC, she is responsible for leading all consumer businesses, business banking, brokerage, all distribution channels, digital, enterprise consumer advocacy, and marketing. She also serves on the board of directors for the PNC Foundation, which has done amazing work during this current crisis. American Banker magazine has recognized Karen as one of the most powerful women in banking each of the last 5 years. She's received a Most Powerful and Influential Woman Award by the National Diversity Council, and she was named an Athena Award finalist. She graduated magna cum laude in business management from Point Park University here in Pittsburgh and completed the CMU Center for Executive Education Leadership Program. Did I mention that Karen's also the immediate past board chair for United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania? Next is the president of Seton Hill University, Dr. Mary Finger. Dr. Finger became the university's 10th president in 2014. Under her leadership, Seton Hill established the Office of Academic Innovation and Planning, designed to help ensure the university remains nimble and strategic in the competitive higher education marketplace. While other independent colleges and universities have struggled in recent years, Seton Hill has experienced a 14% growth in enrollment. That can be attributed in large part to Dr. Finger's initiative to create new academic programs, expanded student opportunities for experiential learning, and expanded campus facilities. Dr. Finger has been in higher ed for nearly 35 years and also serves as vice chair of the board of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities. She is a member of the boards of the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference, Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, and the Pennsylvania Economy League of Pittsburgh. Dr. Tricia Gadsden is our next panelist today. Dr. Gadsden is CEO of Macedonia Family and Community Enrichment Center, also known as FACE, a community-based organization that serves more than 3,000 people every year. She holds a national certification as a bullying prevention program trainer and consultant from Clemson University and a leadership credential for strength-based family workers from Temple University. In addition, Dr. Gadsden is a recognized diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant and facilitator. She obtained training from the National Multicultural Institute and holds a Fostering Diversity and Inclusion certificate from Yale School of Management. She serves as president of the African American Strategic Partnership, a collaborative of African American nonprofit leaders. Last year, she was recognized by the New Pittsburgh Courier as one of Pittsburgh's 50 Women of Excellence. Dr. Gadsden earned her undergraduate psychology degree from Syracuse, a Master's of Science in Professional Leadership and Program Development at Carlow University, and received her PhD in Community Engagement from Point Park University. Next up is Tammy Minier. Tammy is Chief Quality Officer for UPMC, as well as the Executive Director at the Beckwith Institute, a foundation supporting innovation in care delivery. Tammy is a passionate leader in the field of clinical care improvement. She has both a BSN and MSN from the University of Pittsburgh and is a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives. She has been recognized as one of the nation's 50 top experts in the field of patient safety and top 130 women health system leaders. Currently, Tammy serves as co-chair of United Way's Women's Leadership Council. Past 6 months has given Tammy a new set of responsibilities. She has been tasked to lead UPMC's response to the COVID-19 crisis. As you can imagine, that's an enormous responsibility, and we are very fortunate to have Tammy join us today. And finally, I want to welcome the CEO and President of United Way Southwestern Pennsylvania, Bobby Watt here. Most of you probably know Bobby. She brought more than 30 years experience in the nonprofit sector with her when she assumed the top role at United Way in 2019. And it certainly has been an eventful first year. Before joining United Way and serving in several leadership capacities, Bobby was past president of the Community Foundation of Westmoreland. She also worked for the American Heart Association in St. Anne Home. Bobby has served as a chairperson of the Standards for Excellence Committee for Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organization, as well as being chair for the advisory team for the Greater Pittsburgh Nonprofit Partnership. Recently, she has accepted an invitation to become a member of the prestigious International Women's Forum. Bobby has taught courses for Duquesne University's Nonprofit Leadership Institute and also taught courses at St. Vincent College and Robert Morris. She holds a doctoral degree in public administration and public policy from the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs and earned her master's degree in nonprofit management from RMU. She's also a published author of the book, The Value of Faith in Action, Building Connections with Older Adults. Okay, you rock stars, let's get this show moving. Our first question is going to Tammy. So, Tammy, in what positive and inspiring ways have you changed on a personal level as a result of the health, economic, and social crisis?
Well, that's an amazing question to start with. And so I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining. And it's a privilege to really be with all of you at this time. There's been so many changes that have really kind of washed over me in the last 9 months. I would say, like many of us, I think we've all been rooted back to what really matters in our world. While we had always worked hard, particularly as women, to balance so many issues, I have certainly learned how to say, oh, well, a little bit more and really focus on what has to matter, particularly in times like this when I felt the enormous responsibility of keeping people safe in Western Pennsylvania from a care delivery perspective. You know, the other thing that has changed during this time for me is, I've always been able to, make pretty reasonably quick decisions. And but I will say during this period, being able to do that even better and more efficiently and learn about teams. How do I leverage the strength of the many people that we have around us, whether it's folks on the call today, which is what, the Women's Leadership Council is about, or within our own organizations. I've really benefited from making atypical decisions, taking person A that I would have never thought about doing job B, and saying, I think you can do this, right? I know you can do this, and asking them to lean in and join us in that way. So those are two very, very real things that I feel good about. And maybe on some days, sleeping standing up, does that count?
It all counts. That's a great answer. I love the oh well. A lot more polite than some of the things that I've been saying.
Yeah, I know I'm on camera, or I would have rarely actually used my own words.
Okay, Tricia, same question for you.
Yes, I agree with Tammy. That's a good question. First, thank you so much for this opportunity to be with all of you today and with such amazing women. I really value my membership in WLC. What I'll say is that I have learned to embrace the notion that there is vulnerability in leadership, that there is strength in that vulnerability. At a time where there is no playbook, there was no chapter written in any leadership or business text that prepares any leader for leading in a pandemic. It was necessary to pivot at every turn, sometimes in every 10 minutes. No sooner than I'd create a policy or process for us, the rules would change and we'd have to do it all again. And it was necessary to be able to sit in that discomfort and say, I don't know, we're going to figure this out together. Especially for my incredible team at Macedonia Face, it was significant that we recognized our vulnerability in that we were living in dual pandemics, recognizing the health pandemic and the impact of racism that has been present for us for so many years. And so consequently, as we began to recognize that this pandemic impacts us, but specifically the community that we serve are at such high risk, and many of our staff members are among the community that we serve, what do we do? And so that sense of vulnerability, faith, and collaboration really kicked in. I learned that we needed to lean on one another, and we locked arms and decided that it was necessary for us to lead in a servant manner and make sure that, quite frankly, people could eat. And so we made sure that we stood up, and that's one of the things that I really began to understand, that as a leader, you don't have to have all of the answers, but you have to have faith in your team, and you have to learn how to lean on your team.
For sure. Very good. Karen, the next one is for you. We know that women have been hit exponentially hard during the pandemic, not only due to job loss, but school closures, childcare pressures, and more. How have you personally managed through the challenges? And what advice do you have for other women based on your own experiences?
All right. Thanks, Tracy. And thanks everyone for having me here today. I absolutely love being a part of United Way and having the opportunity to interact with all of the wonderful women. So gosh, I wish I had a good answer for you, Tracy. I can only share what I have done, and I know that my life's different than others, so everyone deals with things differently. I have to agree that women have been hit a bit harder through this in many ways, whether it's the jobs that they're in that have been impacted, or just because I guess I would say we're the caretaker of everything, right? It isn't just the home and the family, but it seems like everything falls on our shoulders. And when all of this hit us like a ton of bricks, I remember that in March, and all of a sudden my world was turned upside down. I have 3 school-age children. So on top of being told we're not going to be in the office anymore, work from home, which was not something I had ever done. So I had to restructure. I learned my kids were going to be home from school for the rest of the year. And my youngest are twins and they're 10, so they need help. Here's what I did. I decided right away the importance of sticking to a routine. So I didn't have to do a commute into work every day, which sometimes would take me an hour. But I just kept to my routine, kept my alarm set for the same time, got up, got showered, got ready. I got, I call myself camera ready every day so that I can interact and be just like I was in the office. And for me, sticking to that routine really helped me kind of get reaccustomed to what my new world was going to be. I think if I didn't do that, I would have been much more disrupted. And then I think, when it comes to the kids, I had to give up on the notion of being the perfect mom and my kids were going to get straight A's because all of a sudden they had a different teacher. And between my husband and I, we had to figure that out. And at least one of my little ones really struggles with school. So it was hard. So giving up that notion that everything's going to be just perfect in the way it was is something I struggle with, but I had to do. And then I had to figure out how to fit all of that into my day on top of my incredibly busy work schedule. So that leads me to the other really important thing, and I always talk about this, which is setting boundaries. So the way we're working, we have to set boundaries around home because you're working at home and you could easily work 24 hours a day. That computer's right there in your face all the time. So you need to set the boundary of when you're going to walk away from that computer and how you're going to interact with your family. And then the same thing with the kids. I had to set boundaries on when is it okay to knock on mommy's office door? And when I give you that look, know that you walk away. And when's mommy going to be available to help with the schoolwork and the homework? And so making that really clear is something I always preach, like tell other people your boundaries and then stick to it because you'll be miserable when you don't. And then Tammy used the kind of, oh, well, for me, I'd say you have to say no to a whole bunch of things. I made time for this today because it was really important to me, but there's a lot of things I have to say no to because it would just get in the way of other priorities. So that's my advice. I would just say, don't let your mind get control of you because we all do that as women. And sometimes let the situation take control of you instead of you taking control of the situation. So just know you can do it. You can figure it out. Take a deep breath.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Karen.
Sure.
All right, the next question is for Bobby. Bobby, we have been living in a time of huge disruption, from the pandemic to economic and educational issues to racial and social justice issues. What do you think we need to do or change to begin resetting for our community to thrive?
Well, it seems like I got the softball question here on the panel to start off. It has been such an incredibly disruptive time. And, it started with the pandemic, but it seems like it's been one fire hose of layering on issue after issue after issue. And I think that we have some of the ingredients of how we move forward. Pittsburgh is a great region for partnerships and figuring out how do we work together to solve problems. And here at United Way, we've been doing an awful lot of that over the last 8 months, working with the health department, working with county leaders, working with the human services departments, our corporate partners, to really creatively solve problems. But here's the thing, the pandemic really laid bare problems that were already among us and escalated them, made them readily much more seen, and impacted more people. And so it's going to take more than what we've been doing to move forward and to reset. And in that way, I think that we really have to, as leaders and community members, listen hard to one another. So we have all of these points of division and crisis: economic, racial, social justice, political, not the least of which is political. And it's so hard for us to listen to one another to understand what the underlying problems that we want and need to solve are. And that's really where I think we need to take this really unique ability that we have to partner and work together, but add in a commitment to listen to the core problems and appreciate them from various perspectives so that we can solve problems that really are more lasting and put some of these issues in better perspective for the long term for us. So I think we're partway there, but we really have some level setting to do around the listening and acting and appreciating differences in our community.
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Mary, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Thank you. I could not agree more with Bobby, and I actually had in my notes that what the pandemic has done is really, I think laid bare is the best terminology, systemic issues that have been prominent for a long, long time. And I take a look at, for example, at education. And so some of the new research coming out of who's currently unemployed and expected to be long-term unemployed, and we know that it's people who don't have a bachelor's degree, who are and many of whom have not completed high school or completed two-year institution. So so you have that reality of limitation because of a limitation of education. And then what we know is that higher education enrollment for this fall was down 19% overwhelmingly from families of lower income families. And so the system just keeps getting more pronounced and people keep falling behind. So I absolutely agree that, with Bobby, that what we have to do is listen. What we have to do is work together. And we also have to advocate. We just have to advocate for really strong education programs from early childhood to post-secondary. That is, that's my job to say that, but it's also the reality that it's the one game changer that we know historically has afforded people access to economic security and that we've fallen behind on. And that's very true when it comes to racial justice as well. I mean, and so, every institution, and our institution is one of those, has to say this is not ancillary anymore. Racial justice, equity, inclusion, diversity is not ancillary. It's, it is centered to who we are and what we do in creating anti-racist institutions. And it comes from the individual institutions, and it also has to come from the community. And we have to continue to work together to build those. But I think the first step is saying this is not an option. This is absolutely not an option. It's not an option in our society. It's not an option for our children. And I think what is really stunning is that when I talk to our young people on campus, it's not an issue. I mean, the racial equality, social equality, equality in terms of sexual orientation is an absolute given. So I think we have to just kind of get to a point when they're actually leading us, but we have a lot of work to do between that and the time that these young people who are in college are actually taking the reins. But I couldn't have put it better. I absolutely agree with you, Bobby.
So there is hope. And that's a nice segue into my next question. So thank you for that. Next question back to Karen. Karen, how have you influenced ways your company has changed based on what we've learned about systemic racial inequities?
You know, the past number of months, I know it's hit me, as probably most of you, just at a really emotional level with the racial inequities that are so in front of us now. They've always been there, but they're just so real, and we have to do something to change it. I have 4 kids, and I honestly worry about what America is going to be like, and is it going to be continue to be so divided and so full of hatred? And I hope not. So I know I can impact my own family, but to think about it more broadly, where could I have an impact is something I gave a great amount of thought to. From my seat as an executive in one of the largest banks in the country, I could impact, you know, we have 9 million customers. So when you look at it through the lens of our banking products and services equitable to all, how can I look at what we provide to our customers and put that lens of making sure everything is accessible to them, equitable, and could help them with their financial lives? That's something I've taken a hard look at with my team, and we've already started to make changes. With my team, I have over 30,000 employees under my direct span of control. So to think about, so unlike my kids, my employees actually tend to want to hear from me, and at least they pretend to hear from me and listen to me. So thinking about that lens and how could I really make an impact there? And it really started with taking the time to have conversations, taking the time to, as I say, not just listen, but hear how people were feeling and ask them how they were feeling. And I learned so much, and it struck me at such an emotional level to hear some of my Black colleagues who I just never really thought deeply about would have had some of these experiences, because they're like me, they sit in roles like me, and to hear some of their life experiences has been really impactful and a big learning journey for me to continue to be on. What I asked my team to do was start with your own backyard. And I just fully believe in that, which is why I started with me. Everybody needs to look at themselves, what they can do to make an impact, and start by cleaning up your own backyard, your own house. And you can do that through a learning experience of what it takes to really impact change. PNC made the $1 billion commitment to help end systemic racism, which is huge. And we named Richard Bynum to lead that effort as an executive committee member. So I've had the opportunity out of the gate to work with Richard directly, as I mentioned, on how we'll serve our communities, where we'll make investments, and how we will help our customers who maybe haven't always had the same opportunities. So that work is ahead of us, but I'm very much engaged in it. And the other place I've had an influence on is our board of directors created a special committee to work with us on this. And I had the opportunity to present to them at their inaugural meeting. And they're very engaged on helping PNC to make the biggest difference that we can. And as a financial institution, we know we impact people where it really matters. We have people from the health side here, and we're the financial side of it. And those are huge impacts to people's lives. And we know we can help. And I'm very committed to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's terrific. Tammy, I'm going to ask you the same question. And if you like, at the risk of sounding like a game show host, I'm happy to repeat the question at any time.
You know, I thank you so much for offering. And Karen, I thank you for those very reflective comments. And you're right, it starts in your own backyard. You know, I grew up on a dairy farm in a dirt road. And we didn't have any diverse people around us. But yet my parents have been and have raised me to be colorblind, open, accepting. And that, you know, speaks testaments to what you say about your own backyard. How we influence ourselves first and the people around us next truly does matter. I've had the privilege too of having some very close friends through my life that were African American and allowed me to see their life through their lens as professionals and people that were also in entry-level positions throughout healthcare. And I'd like to believe that that was part of what drove me to my passion for quality. Quality in healthcare is not equal. It is not. And one of the things that several years ago, I had the opportunity to partner with Dr. Steve Evans, who's one of our surgeons here at UPMC who cares deeply about breast cancer and breast health. The statistics about African American women in breast cancer care, in screening mammographies, in seeking care are deplorable. They're deplorable. And so, not only by partnering with physicians who are passionate, but by also this commitment that this summer has provided the wonderful platform to visualize for others the actual disparities in clinical outcomes. I've made the personal commitment in all of the quality measures at UPMC to over time begin to show them through those diverse lenses. So do equal people, starting from day one with COVID, we knew that our African American population was more at risk. More African American people were dying across the world than white people. And we had to go to that level of understanding about the differences to be able to make sure we were doing all that could be done to assure that those populations were cared for appropriately and those people were given those opportunities. So I think that the platform has also really allowed us to think a lot about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is the phrase that we've started to use more often. Not long ago, we hosted, as many sites have started to do, open panels with our leaders to talk about these subjects. I think most people are invisible to the microaggressions that exist within and across people. One of my very dear friends, who's an extremely accomplished individual, has been pulled over 9 times by the police for no reason in our region. One of our other diversity leaders drives a sports car. He loves his sports car. Every time he goes somewhere downtown and he gets out of his beautiful sports car, people whisper that, oh, he must be a stealer, because they don't think African American men could be that successful to have a car like that unless they were an athlete. He's shared other stories about being in the middle of dinner in a very lovely restaurant and being given his bill when his food was being served. So I think all of us as individuals, even though we think we're open, we think we know, if you haven't really listened, you don't know. And so my message is very deep in that you really not only have to listen, as Karen and Bobby and others have said, you have to ask. That's what I would implore all the women who are leaders on this phone to do. Don't just listen, ask. Ask about experiences, ask what has happened, ask about people's lives. Because if we don't, we won't fix it. And it will perpetuate for decades, because it's a little bit, I use this horrible analogy probably right now in COVID times, but it's a little bit like hand washing in healthcare, right? Horrible topic, wash your hands, wear your mask, do all the things you're supposed to do right now. But having said that, having spent years observing people who are supposed to wash their hands and don't, and you can sit here and say, it's been 200 years. The world has known, wash your hands to prevent an infection, and they still don't do it. And why doesn't it happen? Well, besides, the occasional human failings, it's because it's the other guy that's causing the problem. I always wash my hands. I'm not the source of that infection. That's somebody else. Because to self-reflect is the hardest thing in the world. And to self-reflect and admit you might not be doing something and unintentionally cause harm to others is really hard. So we just have to keep asking and listening and hearing and expressing as leaders. It's just not okay. under no circumstances is any of this okay. I committed to seeing our outcomes in healthcare be presented and understood as along the lines of our diverse world. So,
thank you for that, Tammy. Very thoughtful. Bobby, the next question is for you, and you better not call this a softball question. We have seen an outpouring of support across the region over the last 7 months. So many people are looking for ways to help. So what advice would you give to those looking for ways to make an impact? And how can they continue to play a role during these trying times?
Yeah. So, you know, we've taken on some heavy discussions so far in the panel. And I think this is a good pivot point to sharing that as many challenges as we have, there is so much hope and light that I am seeing in the community, you know, from day one of this pandemic. And it really started with when we were called upon at United Way to take contacts from the health department at 211. And within 24 hours, I had half of my regular staff, who, by the way, were not at all trained to answer contacts and calls at 211, putting their hand up. This goes back to something Tammy said about person A doing job B, raising their hand and saying, I will take this on, so that we could begin to take 1,000 contacts a day to help people in the community. But part of that outreach was around, what can I do?
Right.
There's so much need in the community. And I think some people are aware of this, but for instance, the food bank's model of distributing food had really been predicated on a lot of older adults coming into the warehouse and helping to package and distribute food. Well, of course, who's most vulnerable to COVID and needed to stay at home were those very volunteers. And so how could we quickly figure out, is it safe? Under what conditions would it be safe? How can we work with the health department to put some guidelines out to help not only our partner agencies, but our own organization figure out how can we mobilize volunteers? And, you know, of course, during this time, financial resources and contributions are a key way that women leaders and all leaders in the community can help us all recover from the pandemic. But there are so many other ways, volunteering being one of them, you know, making phone calls to older adults who are isolated, volunteering for virtual learning hubs that are set up around the community to help kids who are not in school, mentoring, delivering food, grocery shopping. So numerous volunteer opportunities. And just a week or so ago, we mobilized over 700 volunteers in a week of caring. And our volunteer engagement director said earlier today, this is the first time we've done a day of caring like this, that like everybody showed up.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to do something to help in their community. So, you know, giving, volunteering, and then the third piece that's really, really important, because private philanthropy will not be able to do everything that needs to be done in recovery in our community, that we have to raise our voices around what do we need in childcare? What do we need to support nonprofit human service organizations who are on the ground, organizations like Trisha's on the ground trying to meet these desperate needs? That we need to lift our voices and advocate for policies in our communities that serve our families and serve our neighbors and friends. So giving, volunteering, lifting our voices. And I know that the women leaders on this panel and on this meeting today are good at doing that. And I invite you to continue to do it and put it on steroids, because we need all of you.
Okay, Trisha, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yes, I listened intently to Bobby's response, and so much of what she said I fully agree with. What I would add to her response for consideration is that in addition to charity, in addition to well-meaning contributions, that we have to recognize the systemic impact of what we're seeing. And what I mean by that is I am encouraging us to be critical thinkers and not blind believers. If you take a data set and you look at that data set and you can tell just by looking at the numbers that it impacts a group identified by gender or race, then that's a systemic problem. And charity won't correct that alone. And so, what we will need to do is to educate ourselves, to engage in racialized conversations, to have those critical conversations, to think through how our policies and practices create a process by which there are so many people in need, and figure out a way that we will make those changes so that the outcomes are different. We should not have to sit here as women and think about the fact that as women, we are shouldering the responsibility in leadership while Karen is at home giving her kids that special kind of look that says, don't come in here because I'm trying to manage this. Or when you saw the video, my husband and I became grandparents for the first time March 4th. And you saw me with my grandson in one arm, leaning into the computer, and another trying to make sure that we deliver the 5,000 meals a month to seniors who needed to eat. And so, what I would say is that we have to have serious conversations that impact policy. We have to lean in, have the courageous conversations, talk about policies, still give, still show up, but be present and intentional and mindful in these policy conversations.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn to Mary now. We've touched on this a little bit already, Mary, but I want to ask you, how has the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic crisis, and the social crisis around racial inequity helped to reshape your notion of leadership?
I think that's a great question. I'm not sure I have a complete answer on it. It's still, in process, because this is, as people have said, this is something that is being dealt with on an hour-to-hour basis, and making lots of mistakes along the way and having some successes along the way. But I think that, that at some level, there could be a lot of competition between the pandemic, economic crisis, and the conversation around racial justice and the cry for racial justice. I mean, I think that when we are looking at institutions and the impact that the pandemic has had on institutions, you're looking easily at things like cutting staff and cutting budgets and how do we survive, and all important questions, and viability is an important concept in reality. But also, I think this is a time that we have to go back to who we are at our core, who we are at our mission, what is our mission, and and really have that conversation around what do we do that makes change in the world, and how do we do that in a way that does, how do we do that effectively and continue to be a viable organization, but also recognize that those are not ancillary kinds of conversations, nor ancillary objectives. And so I'm fortunate to be in an institution where mission is the core of everything we do. The dignity of the individual is core to not only the institution, but also the founding theology upon which we're based. So we can go back to that. I'm not so sure that other organizations, I'm sure that other organizations don't have that level of mission. So we are fortunate to do that, and we must keep coming back to that. I mean, obviously, this has resulted there's been a huge need for a level of nimbleness and urgency and all the kinds of things that organizations are talking about. But for my institution, as we balance all of these competing issues, staying true to mission and saying it doesn't matter if we survive if we aren't who we need to be. And so coming back to the core of our mission is important. And I would think that that's something that most institutions should be looking at as well.
Okay. So this is actually, I'm going to ask all of you this question. We've been talking about how everyone has been impacted on multiple levels over the last 7 decades, months. What lasting changes do you see in your specific industry as a result of the pandemic? And Tricia, I'm going to start with you by asking more specifically, how has the crisis impacted your organization's ability to serve those in need?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say that, wow, it has impacted everything, every single aspect of our business operations has been impacted by this crisis. What I will say is that um, in terms of, I think Bobby referred to it earlier, that there are signs of hope. And the hope that I see is in the team of colleagues that I work with. We were, as a community based organization that focuses on community engagement. I mean, if you think about that term, engagement is all about being in a community, connecting skin to skin, touching people, delivering food, connecting in meaningful ways. And all of a sudden, it's now unhealthy to do it in that way. And you have an office where we can't have everyone there. And so it changed our technology, it changed our business operation, it changed the way we connected to the consumers who look to see us the most, who need to see us the most in terms of social well-being. We're now yelling through windows, waving through windows. It impacted everything. But I think what I will say is it showed the resilience of the human spirit, of people who dedicate their lives to servant leadership, who dedicate their lives to serving others. One of the other colleagues talked about, I think it was Tammy, talked about the fact that we knew very early on that the African American community was impacted most heavily by COVID-19. And many of my staff members who are delivering food are also senior citizens. This is their second career, and yet they showed up every day and wanted to deliver. So I would say that this has strengthened our resolve to meet our mission of delivering and serving our community, delivering services to and serving our community.
Very good. Thank you. Bobby, same question for you. Bobby, you're muted.
Thank you. There was a truck going down the road, so I muted and I forgot about it. I would say there are some lasting and really positive impacts on the ways that we do our work here at United Way. Because really the strength of United Way is being this connective tissue to try to bring corporations and nonprofit organizations and public agencies together to solve problems. And so this pandemic has really escalated that work and heightened the need for us to work in this kind of partnership. And it has forced us to both focus and move faster than we've ever moved before. So it's taken out a lot of those layers of process to be able to serve in the community. So I think those are the upsides, but there are certainly going to be challenges moving forward in terms of being able to raise and leverage the resources, the economic impacts of the pandemic and the recession and unemployment will be with us for a while, and that will really challenge us to be able to meet human service needs along with budget cuts at the state and federal levels. So I see certainly some positive impacts in the way that we deliver services, but some challenges that will be with us for some time.
Yeah, challenging times. Tammy, question for you. How have you been able to meet the needs of frontline workers who don't have the option to work remotely?
Yeah, that's certainly where it all began, right? One of the things that we are, I think, the most awestruck by as a country has been the selfless work of many individuals, whether they've been in healthcare or other industries, as Tricia was speaking, who just showed up and stood up and made it happen, irregardless of what was what they did in taking on their own risk. I think early on, when this was so much for all of us clinically unknown, right? I didn't know anything more than the average person, and needed to learn quickly. I think one of the most important things that we did to support our front lines was really visibility. I created an email group of 18,000 caregivers overnight.
Oh.
And said, we got this, we got this, like, we got you, it's okay. And from there became quite focused on what they needed to be safe, right? Temperature screenings, personal protective equipment, medications, drugs, treatments, and this continuous flow from a daily perspective of, we hear you, we understand, we want you to be safe, I think was really one of the most important things. And as we did that, then we would learn, right? Oh, okay, all right. Maybe you don't have to put people on a ventilator so quickly. Maybe you can let them work through this protocol differently, because that means a lot. And so as we went from no patients in February to as high as 200 plus patients in July, and this morning have 193 in our hospitals, it's the ability to make sure they have what they need to feel safe. And also recognize just the raw emotion of all of this, right? Early on, when we were limiting visitors, our employees became the patients' families.
Yeah.
They had no one else there to hold their hand when they were dying. They had no one else there to hold their hand when they were scared. And how do you support people that are giving that of their soul, right? You have to be there in a very present way. So our leaders came to work every day. They didn't not come to work. And the people that work and run our hospitals and run our clinics, where there were staff, there were leaders. And so I couldn't be more proud of what they've done there. But I think the real issue is, as we point out, you have to let them know you got it. You got it. You hear them and communicate. So it's been a privilege to watch them. And, as a benefit, for a long time in my career, there wasn't the respect and value of healthcare workers, or workers that made these selfish contributions, like Tricia's team and others who, just put their own needs aside. I think the world has grown to respect and appreciate those individuals more than ever again. And I think that's a good thing for the world.
Yeah, I agree. That's great. Mary, how are you ensuring quality education while also keeping students safe on campus?
Sure. Well, I think we're doing everything that most places are doing. We're doing universal testing, and we're doing lots of education, and we have an app, self test every morning, and we, and contact tracing app, and we've got a lot of people educated around that, and it put a lot of resources into the clinical part of it. We increased our number of nurses on campus, increased our exam rooms. Lots of education, just a lot of education around, because I think, frankly, has been curious to me is that these kids are not getting very sick. Matter of fact, our nurse is saying the flu is worse. And so that's a problem, because they don't see it as a real issue. And so just communicating, and also communicating about how we stay in this together, that this is not just you may be going home on the weekend and seeing grandma, or, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're going home for Thanksgiving. How do we so a level of education, because I think we're doing it relatively in a bit of a vacuum at this point. And of course, we're in face-to-face instruction. 60% of our students really need face-to-face instruction. It's the labs, it's the arts and sciences. But we've got a very strong program. We've been a mobile technology campus for 10 years. So so all of our faculty are trained in virtual learning. So they're able to pivot quickly, particularly if kids are ill or they've been in close contact with someone. So I think we're aggressively managing it among a population that is not seeing the kind of care that results in hospitalization or, the kind of thing that might encourage a little bit more fear. I wouldn't mind a little bit more fear right now. I mean, I don't want them to be fearful, but they are 18 and 20 and really, so this doesn't hit them quite as close. And then when you hear Tammy talk about where we're at with regard to hospitalizations at this point, trying to communicate that totality of the reality and we've got all great partners. All of our faculty and staff are doing that, and our coaches and their advisors. So we continue to do very rigorous instruction, are able to pivot quickly if we need to, have a lot of hybrid classes at this point. But I think it really is about keeping them as educated as we can, as safely as we can, and being as aggressive as we can with testing. That's a big part of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Karen, we just have a couple minutes before we're going to get into the Q&A portion. But Karen, perhaps you can tell us how COVID-19 has disrupted financial institutions and what role they're going to play in the recovery.
Sure, it absolutely disrupted us. Every government program that rolled out, whether it be the stimulus checks or the PPP program, we almost overnight had to figure out how we were going to support that for our customers. And we jumped in right away, as most financial institutions did, to, without question, waive fees, refund fees. We did tens of millions of dollars of fee waivers for our customers during this period if they were at all impacted by COVID. So, we'll continue to have to focus on those things because we need to play a role in this recovery, and we need to make this recovery happen. So many people we still see are struggling, and especially our small business owners. They need further stimulus to get past in order to stay afloat. And we see that the potential lies ahead that depending on how long COVID remains with us, this economy is going to take much bigger hits possibly. Just what Tammy was saying about how many people hospitalized, we're back to the peaks we were in July. It's a scary scenario. So I thought I'd share that we recently did a survey of small business owners where about 60% of them said that if the pandemic continues for another year, they will be out of business. Imagine how horrific that is to all of our futures, and we can't let that happen. So it's clear, and everyone should know that this recovery for especially our small businesses and our industries remain in peril right now. There is no easy answer, but banking is clearly linked to the performance of the economy because we can lend money to people. We can help to give them financial advice, and that's what we intend to continue to do and figure it out day by day as we need to react to whatever the situation is and help people to navigate through this very important role that we play in that.
Okay. One more question before we get to the other questions from those in attendance. During these difficult times, many of us are looking to find inspiration to keep moving forward. So who have you turned to for inspiration, support as a leader? Or what is one of your favorite inspirational sayings or philosophies that has helped you get through these tough times? Does anyone want to go first? You can raise your hand or I'll call on somebody.
I'll jump in since I always have my, I have just been saying over and over again, this too shall pass. And that's such a common phrase, and it's appropriate at all times in all situations, but I think it's really appropriate now. We all just have to say, take a deep breath, make the best decision you can in the moment, and move on. This will pass.
Hear, hear. That was my grandmother's favorite phrase.
Was it?
Can we hear from someone else? Anyone else want to join in? Tricia?
Yes. So I'm a faith-based leader, and so my orientation is my faith, and so I lean on Philippians 4:13. It says, "I can do all things through God who strengthens me." And in the most difficult times when I was nervous going to meet the team, I would say my prayers, get to the office, walk out the door, and just get to work. And so I would lean on my faith.
Very good. Hey, Bobby, how about you?
I would say that I've often turned back to start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And I think that really has helped me pivot through all of this uncertainty. And then the second thing I would say is that I have really gained a lot of support and resilience through watching my 13-year-old daughter manage through all of the various ins and outs of this crisis. And it's really set just a fabulous example of, you got to show up and do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the good news is we have a lot of great questions for you. The bad news is you're going to be here till midnight answering them all. We could be here for hours with this great discussion, and I cannot thank you enough. Your answers have just been terrific. And I don't know if you're seeing the wonderful comments that are coming through on chat. People really appreciate it. So let's start with one of the tougher ones. What recommendations do you have on how to become more involved in influencing the needed policy change? Who would like to field that one?
Yeah, I'll go with that. I would say that first of all, it requires a level of self-education in terms of knowing the impact of policy, but begin engaging with your um, local city council representatives, your state representatives, your state senators. Are they are there to serve you, to serve us. And so engage in conversation with them about what is on the floor at that particular time, and talk about what you are seeing that is impacting your community and your neighbors, and what needs to happen. One of the things that we talked about is childcare. Like, that's an important issue that should be something that is discussed, and I would just say engage in those conversations.
If I could just add to what Tricia has shared, is that United Way is putting a lot more emphasis and focus on public policy advocacy, and we will help you get engaged with those issues because we know that they're absolutely critical to recovery.
Okay, that's great. Hear that, everyone? All right, next question is for Tammy. Tammy, someone wants to know, what is the biggest lesson you have learned in the past 7-8 months?
Oh my, that's such a great question, and there's so many lessons. What's the biggest? I kind of go back to my colleagues as I've listened to them that one of my phrases I didn't share when we were talking earlier is you never know how strong you can be until it's the only choice you have, right? Which is, comes out of faith, comes out of a lot of things. And so I think it is, I love what Karen said. It's just this too shall pass, like one day at a time, one foot in front of the other, and try not to dwell too much on yesterday, because you're not going that way, right? You're going forward. I would say my lesson for myself is, at times we have all through the years perseverated on too many things that at the end of the day didn't matter. Like, really? And so I've come to call them fleas, because it works. And so just get rid of your fleas. Don't think about the fleas. Especially while you're getting trumped by elephants. Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to turn to Karen for the next one. Karen, what do you think will be required from our leaders to get us to the next phase of recovery?
Oh, well, there are so many aspects to what recovery means in this case. I always go back to the thing I think leaders need through every day, but through trying times even more, is to demonstrate they care. And your care for others Your care for the community can show up in so many ways, and people need to know you care about them. You need to listen, and then you need to speak your voice where it can have an impact, and be persistent with getting to the things that really matter, where you can make a difference, and just keep plowing forward, but be persistent about meeting the needs that are out there. And I think that all starts with listening and caring. And those are two qualities that every great leader should have.
Okay. This one was for Tricia. Thinking back on the early days of the crisis, what do you think were the most important qualities of leadership?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say flexibility and the ability to just pivot. You've heard all of us talk about the need to just shift and make decisions, and no sooner than we make a decision, what we knew changed, and so we had to readjust. But um, s- like my colleagues who've been sharing all afternoon, we were trained in certain aspects of business or certain aspects of leadership. And what happened when we were hit with this pandemic, there were aspects that normally, under normal circumstances, did not impact the type of decision making that we would have to undertake, that we found ourselves thinking through. Okay, so what do I do if someone comes in sick and we don't know what to do and how to notify other people? Because at that time, all of those protocols weren't in place. And so it was the necessity to be flexible, the necessity to grasp onto as much education as possible, and the necessity to lean on colleagues.
Yeah. So this next question is a little bit similar. I'm going to ask Bobby this one. The uncertainty of the pandemic has necessitated quick shifts and pivots. How might leaders operationalize a flexible and nimble culture?
Well, I think we're learning that as we move forward. I think that we have tipped over more sacred cows in the last 7 months in our organization, and I think many on the meeting today would say the same thing. But it really is, thinking through, is this process, is there some value to this process, or can we step back from it because the need really requires us to focus and act faster? And so, one of the things that we did right out of the gate was say to our partner agencies, we recognize the world has changed. Use our grants in the best possible way in your communities to serve people. So I think that was a key example of that was 2 years worth of work that we said, we just got to take that and set it aside and focus on what's in front of us. And so I think that that's what we just have to ask ourselves every day. What are we trying to solve for? And is this process getting in our way? And should we just focus in on letting go of it and accomplishing the goal in front of us?
Very good. Mary, next one is for you. As we move into recovery, what are the biggest questions you are asking yourself, and what should other leaders be asking?
Well, I think a lot of that's been covered. It's what is the world going to look like, and how do we anticipate that? And I think that we can anticipate as much as we can. We can surmise what it's going to look like, but to be flexible when we actually start to see this data evolve and what it's going to be like. And I think as we look and try to anticipate the new world, the post-pandemic world, one of the big questions for all leaders should be is and people have said this, what do you hold on to? What is core? What is core both in terms of your mission, who you are, but also processes? Very important to get rid of that, which is which is going to slow us down. But some of those processes are important, as people have talked to. The communication, the making sure people feel like they're included. And so balancing all of that is really the kind of things that I think about as we hopefully move into recovery.
Very good. Okay. Again, what a terrific conversation. Can't thank you all enough. We could really go on and on with this. But now we're going to turn to something else. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Jackie Feit, Communications Coordinator at UPS and Women's Leadership Council Co-Chair. Jackie?
Thank you, Tracy. Wow, what an insightful and thought-provoking discussion. And I have to say, when you ask for inspiration, I think that we get that from the panelists today. So just thank you to everyone who attended and participated in today's kickoff. As today's program comes to an end, we again want to thank our moderator, Tracy Serto, and our esteemed group of panelists for sharing their thoughts and insights with us today. We have been so very lucky to share this time with you. And of course, you know, we wouldn't be able to bring you this incredible panel and hold this event without the support of our sponsors. So let's say thank you again to our premier sponsor, UPMC and UPMC Health Plan. Our keystone sponsors, PNC, Highmark, and Allegheny Health Network. And today's event sponsors, FedEx Ground and Sendell Motors. And don't forget about today's after party. For those of you who signed up, you received for the networking after today's panel discussion, you received an email earlier, and you just want to click on that link and you'll be able to join some of your WLC members for some networking. But before I go, I just want to remind you how important you are in making real change in our community. The fact that you were here today, participating in this important discussions, means you not only care about your community, but you know your actions matter. Here's the most important action you can take. If you are already a member, please renew your WLC membership today. And I'll go further. Please consider taking our 110% challenge with your donation. The statistics are overwhelming. Food requests have increased more than 128%. Calls to 211 have gone up 57% since March, many of them coming from people who never thought they would need help meeting basic needs. We've seen a 27% increase in requests for help with housing, and that's why we still have, as of now, a moratorium on evictions. Increasing your gift by 10% or more can make a large impact in addressing these needs and, as you heard earlier in the discussion, preparing ourselves for what is to come in the next year. So please, if you can, join me and increase last year's donation by 10% and designate it to the United Way's Emergency Basic Need Fund. And I know there are some guests today who are not currently WLC members. Let me say, there has never been a better time to join. You've seen today the caliber of our members and the importance of our mission. We need your support and your voice in continuing the conversation. In addition to your membership renewal, we also ask that you be an advocate for the Women's Leadership Council. So whether you're in your workplace, with your clients, your contacts, your friends, help us spread the word by sharing the important work we are doing and inviting others to join us. We need more change makers like you. Please be a champion for United Way, for Women's Leadership Council, and for our community. Thank you.